So we're going to switch topics a little bit and talk about antecedent interventions. In general, the majority of this course will focus on antecedent interventions as well as positive behavior supports. As the foundational course, we really want to stress the importance of antecedent interventions. In future courses, we'll go much more into depth on consequence strategies and interventions. In general, antecedent interventions really focus on building skills, identifying deficits, and planning for proactive strategies. So if you remember from our first video series of this week, antecedents is anything that precedes the behavior, comes right before the behavior. So we're really focusing on interventions in place prior to a behavior being emitted. The interventions can be used proactively to increase the probability that appropriate behavior will occur and decrease the probability that challenging behaviors will occur. Here is a list of different examples of antecedent interventions. These are only a few examples. There are many other types of antecedent interventions as well. Functional communication is a huge focus for our programming. It establishes appropriate communication that can compete or replace problem behaviors. So if I can ask you to stop an aversive stimuli by saying, I need a break, that's functional communication in replace of hitting because there's an aversive stimuli occurring. Visual prompts are another big one. We use visual schedules, calendars, labels, different types of picture prompts. And also just providing really clear expectations. So stating the rules is a really big antecedent intervention, especially in a school setting. Providing appropriate low probability, high probability ratios, meaning providing enough easy tasks and an appropriate ratio of easy to difficult tasks. If you think about giving a learner an entire page of long division and they are just learning long division, that may be really difficult and frustrating. Whereas if I gave them a page of some simple addition, subtraction, and a couple long division questions, they may be more likely to engage in those harder tasks as well. So low P, high P, and you guys will read more about that as well. We'll get into a little more depth right now on contingency contracting, so another type of antecedent intervention. Another word for this is behavioral contracts. So contracting is placing the contingency for access to a reinforcer into a written document. In the contract itself, the teacher instructor creates a permanent product that can be referred to if questions arise. Permanent product is just a fancy word for data that can be saved. So if you're grading a paper, that paper that you graded is a permanent product. So in order to set up the contract, should be the product of reasonable negotiations between the student and the teacher, or parent and child, or adolescent, caregiver and adult, whoever the two people the contract is between. You want to use if-then statements, although the exact wording may depend on the sophistication of the student. The example here is Levon's Good Citizen contract, which states, I think I can clean up my school supplies by the end of 5 minutes after each class. If I do, I will be able to earn 2 minutes of extra special reading time for myself. My teacher will help by setting the 5-minute timer near the end of class and giving me a thumbs up when I'm cleaning up my school supplies. There's a signature date and both student and teacher signs it. So you can see here that Levon helped create this. It's written. So that's your permanent product, and it's an agreement between a student and a teacher. And basically you can see here that she's earning extra reading time. So prior to writing this contract, a preference assessment was probably completed in order to identify independent reading as a reinforcer. You'll also notice here that the contract is written in first-person language. So Levon is using I statements. It's in the learner's perspective. With that said, you'll see that there are some obvious prerequisite skills for using behavior contracting. The learner's profile should have some skill set of reading. You'll also see an appropriate age range for behavioral contracts as well. This probably wouldn't be appropriate for a 2, 3, 4-year-old, but once you're in school age, these become really great tools. Um, there's several advantages to written contracts. It's a permanent document, so you can always refer back to it. There's a process of negotiation that leads to the contract. So it enables the students to see themselves as active participants. They get to sort of set their own expectations, and also the reinforcer. They get to pick the reinforcer. Um, Writing the contract also emphasizes individualized instruction, and you can also use this at IEP meetings, share with parents, across caregivers, across settings. So there's many advantages to the actual written portion of this behavioral contract. There are some basic rules that are listed below. Um, you can see the references here for those rules. The first one is the contract payoff or reward should be immediate. So whatever the reinforcement is that's decided upon, it should be immediate after the targeted behavior occurs. The initial contracts should call for and reward small approximations. So this basically means that we want to reward progressive steps toward the overall targeted behavior. Um, we don't want to set criteria too high or else we'll never receive reinforcement. So we want to be able to set criteria for reinforcement at that learner's level so that they're able to access it. Reward frequently and with small amounts. The contract should call for a reward accomplishment rather than obedience. So this is basically suggesting that the contract focuses on accomplishments that lead to independence rather than obedience. So the example here is if you accomplish X, Y, and Z, you'll be rewarded with X, Y, and Z, as opposed to if I tell you what to do, I'll reward you. The next rule here is reward the performance after it occurs. So make sure that you're actually providing reinforcement, meaning as a consequence. So behavior occurs, you're reinforced. Contract must be fair. The term of the contract must be clear, so written very clearly, the targeted behavior and the exact reinforcement. The contract must be honest. Honest meaning it's carried out immediately and carried out according to the terms specified in the contract. It should also be written in positive terms. So if I do this, I get this, rather than you will not do this, I will not do that, then I will not get. And finally, contracting as a method must be used systematically. So behavioral contracts are really great tools within a school setting. Just be mindful of what type of learner this would be appropriate for. We'll go into a lot more depth on other antecedent interventions. You'll continue reading on them. We'll also link these to PBS as well in the future.